OpenAI have just announced their second ever AI agent, and it's called Deep Research. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly what it is, how it works, and I'm going to give you some real world use cases and explain what the implications are for the AI industry. And if you're new to this channel, my name is Alfie Marsh. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Toolflow AI. We're a platform that helps you build AI agents and automations without a single line of code. We also have an AI agency where we can actually build custom AI agents and automations on your behalf, and also train your staff with workshops tailored to whatever you need. So if either of those are interesting to you, then click on the link in the description below and book a call with one of our team. And with that being said, let's get into the video. First, what exactly is deep research? So this is an AI agent that can perform really deep research using hundreds of different sources across the internet to provide you with a analyst kind of consultant style research report. Now this AI agent is powered by their latest model O3, which as of recording this video is currently not available to the public. There's O3 mini, but this is actually using the official full O3 model. Now the other chat models like GPT-4 Omni, they give you very quick results. You basically ask a question and the training data is going to give you a very quick reflexive answer. This AI agent performs deep research and can take anywhere between 5 and 30 minutes to give you an answer. It does this by using the O3 model to understand your query in question, but it also has access to the web browser where it can search hundreds of different sources, basically extracting all of that information, performing reasoning over it based off of the original query, and kind of looping this until it answers your question. And then at the end, once it's happy with the results, it will write this up into a research style report. Now this can generate reports of say 10,000 plus words, so it goes into a lot of detail. Now it's only available on the Pro plan, which costs $200 a month, so that's the first limitation. The second limitation is that it's only currently available in the US, and they're hopefully planning to roll this out in the UK, I think Switzerland and some other European Economic Area countries in the coming weeks. But for the moment it's only in the US, which means you'll have to use a VPN if you want to access it from elsewhere. In addition to that, you only get 100 queries included in that Pro plan every single month. So depending on how much research you're actually going to do, that might not be that much, but we'll have to test it out and see over the next coming few weeks. Now, as Sam Altman says, its ability to do tasks that might take days or even weeks for a human to do in a matter of minutes could save an enormous amount of money. The company is calling this a significant step in the direction of AGI, primarily because its ability to synthesize information. So for AGI, they understand that not only do they need to be able to understand information, they then need to be able to discover and uncover and kind of create new information or thought. But before you get to that part of AGI, you really need to be able to synthesize complex information in the beginning. And this currently is the best way to do it. Oh, by the way, if you are liking this video, please do hit the like button and also subscribe. We know that the majority of people who watch these videos haven't actually subscribed yet. So if you want to see more content like this, smash that subscribe button. Thanks very much. So how does deep research operate under the hood? Greg Brockman, who's the co-founder of OpenAI and one of the more technical people behind the scenes, says it's actually a pretty simple agent. He describes it as only using O3, which is the model, plus web search, which is a tool that has been given, and then given access to Python code as like function calling, basically allows it to take in data and do reports and other kind of math. So behind the scenes, it's actually an agent which is very simple. There's just the model, there's some web searching, and then there's some Python code. Now, I think his tweet here is maybe oversimplifying it. I wouldn't be surprised if behind the scenes there's actually a slightly more complex workflow. Specifically, when you're doing this kind of deep research, you might take a query from the user and you might fan that query out into lots of different examples. So if you ask for what's the best sushi restaurant in San Francisco, so you might be able to query fan that into lots of different queries. For example, what's the best Asian food in San Francisco? What's the best sushi market in San Francisco? So there's different ways to ask the same question and then go and search those across the web. And we're doing this kind of query fanning because we want to attack the question and the query from different angles to get a much wider and denser, deeper kind of array of information to do the research from. So the general gist is you ask a query in the chat. Then the model is going to ask you some questions back. And really, these are just clarifying questions. So if you ask to do a research report, let's say on a rare eye disease called North Carolina macular dystrophy, and let's say you want to understand what are some of the cures to this disease, or if it's passed on to your children, children, are there any ways to prevent your children from getting that disease? This is just an example query. Now, the model may ask backwards to that with some very specific questions. Would you like to more focus on the cures for the disease? Or is there anything that you like to focus on preventative measures? It might just give you some particular questions around what types of sources you're interested in. So it's going to kind of refine your query a little bit with these back and forward questions. Now, this is something that people have experimented with, and the back and forth questions can sometimes be annoying. It's almost always going to ask you a clarifying question. And sometimes you might just want to ask it something and have it answered straight away. So that's just something to bear in mind. In particular, because the type of prompts that you have here could have a massive impact on the research that you actually get back. Now, once it's got all those queries and it goes out and searches the web, it's going to go and scrape the information from each of those sources. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if OpenAI have already indexed the entire web and are doing this in kind of like a mass basis, so it's low latency and very, very quick. But once it's then got all of those resources, it's going to provide you with citations to each one of those. Not only is it going to look at just text, but it can also take in images and PDFs and other information from across the web. So that's really, really important, because when you think about how much information is wrapped up in a PDF through images and other kind of like data, it's not just text that's available on websites. So that's really, really interesting. And once it's wrapped it all up, it will give you back a research style paper with citations. Now, there are some limitations. They still can hallucinate. So we already know that models can answer things that may just simply not be true. Now, one of the points that they actually talk about in the product release on their website is that these hallucinations, it can sometimes be susceptible to what it might be rumors. So it's not very good at understanding whether a citation or a source is actually high quality or not. And this is actually a really, really big part of why this research tool might not be that good. It's taken lots and lots of information, but if it's not qualifying whether those sources are good or not, then you might just get really bad answers. And even though there are cited sources, it could be just absolute gibberish. So what are some of the use cases? Now, overall, I think this is a really interesting progression in the way that the models are being used. Although this is using one of their latest model, Deep Research in and of itself isn't just a model. It's actually O3, which is their latest model, and it's been fine-tuned to be able to use the web search tool and this kind of Python coding very specifically, but ultimately it's just their main knowledge with a little bit of fine-tuning. But it's not just the model, it's the fact that it's got access to these tools, and there will be some sort of system prompt behind that. The thing that's really, really interesting about this progression of models is the kind of traditional old school models, and I say old school, you know, they're in the last couple of years, is that they are very kind of reflexive. They give you a quick answer. You ask a question, you get an answer back. They're not really thinking in that sense. And so their answer is going to mainly be based off of their training data. If something was outside their training data, they don't have access to it, they're not going to be able to answer your question. And this is what sometimes leads to hallucinations, because it's always going to try and give you an answer. It's going to try and please you. Then the sort of second generation of models that we're starting to see now, the O1, the O3 models, these are the reasoning models where they take longer time to think. And so this is more like engaging your system to thinking, where you ask a question and instead of just saying, this is the answer, you're going to think about it. So if I was to say, what's 2 plus 2, you can just say 4. I didn't have to do the math and calculation. That's just my system one thinking. But what if I said, you know, what's the square root of 17 and a half? I'm going to have to write down on a piece of paper and go through logically step by step. I can't just reflexively think of that in my system one thinking. That requires system two thinking. And so these second sort of generation of models are doing that system two thinking through the steps logically, checking through whether they make any sense, and kind of looping through this to get much better results. Now, with this latest Deep Research product, it's not a new model per se, but it's using those latest reasoning models and then adding some extra tools on top to do this really performant research. So now not is it only just using the O3 model to do the reasoning and then think about what the answer should be. It's doing reasoning and actually going and searching for specific information, you know, externally, i.e. via the internet. Now, one thing that's really important here is it's only accessing information publicly available on the internet. As you can see from this tweet here, there are product requests to be able to access perhaps things that are behind a paywall. So think of if you have a subscription to research papers that aren't public, but they're behind a paywall. Or perhaps you've got access to a bunch of licensed intellectual property that may be in the form of books or research reports. So anything like that that's behind a paywall or perhaps not in the public domain. The OpenAI product release actually talks about this as part of the kind of future plans for the product, which is think about what happens when we open this research paper to something far beyond just what's publicly available on the internet. Think about connecting your databases like your CRM. Think about adding other kind of external sources or files that you could add up. When we start to take all the information that's not just public, but it's also behind closed doors, then this kind of research papers can actually be very, very, very powerful. So let's look at some use cases. McKay Wrigley on Twitter talks about using this as your daily kind of one-stop report. You can have a report put in there like a prompt to say, look at the latest news on a particular topic or any advancements in this particular area. Give it some very specific prompts and controlled kind of environments here. And then you could even set that up with a task and have that recur every day. And when you think about that, there are entire businesses which are purely there that provide you perhaps weekly reports on trends and issues and things that have happened in the industry. So imagine that you wanted to have a report of every time that, I don't know, your company was mentioned on the news, or any time that there was some new development in some sort of medical field. You could have that report sent directly to your inbox. And now for a more serious example, Siki Chen mentioned that he's saving $150,000 on private medical research for his daughter's condition. Now, I did an example with this, looking at a very rare eye condition called North Carolina macular dystrophy disease. This is something that's very close to me and my family, and I've actually grown up with this for most of my life. Now, up until now, I didn't know if there was any cures for that. For my whole life, there hasn't been. And I did a research report on exactly that to understand what's the latest research in this particular eye condition. And I actually found out that there's still no cure in some people who already have it, but there are ways to now prevent perhaps your children from getting it with certain gene therapies. Now, this is something that you might pay literally thousands of dollars for people to go and research and tell you or find solutions, and you can just do this in literally 5 minutes. And this is doing this across hundreds of different academic papers and the latest research. It's massively reduced the time to find very specific, nuanced pieces of information and presenting that in a really comprehensive way. So when we go back to their comment about AGI and the fact that to be able to uncover and discover new information, you first need to be able to synthesize and understand with extreme context information that already exists. Now, if we can simply do that with all the information we already know, and we can start using these agentic tools to start drawing conclusions between somewhat uncorrelated pieces of information, we may very quickly be able to get to the point of scientific discovery. So is this research tool actually one of the first steps to AGI, or are we almost already there? Who knows? I'll let you be the judge of that, but it's certainly very interesting. Now, Dharmesh Shah, the CTO of HubSpot, used it to do a competitive analysis of the CRM market. HubSpot is a CRM, a customer relationship management platform, and he got an 11,000 word report. Now, in this tweet, something that really stood out for me was not really so much what he said about the report, it was this part here. He says, "What has me excited is not just that it can produce this kind of output, though that's pretty cool. What has me excited is that we'll be able to use this kind of output as input to subsequent step in an agentic workflow." Now, when you think about what that actually means, we could be using this research perhaps maybe for something slightly more commercial. Maybe we're going to get an inbound lead on our website about a customer. They give us their email information and a couple of quick pieces of insight into why they reached out. Now, we could use something like this deep research tool to go and search all of the information available on the internet about this person or their company, any news events that have happened, maybe things that could link to why we might be a good time to use our product. Now, that's just publicly available information, but what happens when we start giving these deep research models access to private information, stuff like funding information or other information that's in your CRM that you've already collected or researched about the customer, perhaps from previous conversations with other stakeholders in the business? Now, when we take this research, we could perform a research step, and then that might go on to a next step, which is to create an introduction email that's hyper personalized to that person. There are all sorts of really interesting ways that we could put this deep research into workflows and use them elsewhere. So is $200 actually worth it? Well, the CEO of Perplexity AI, Aravind Srinivas, thinks that he could be able to add this into their product at 10 to 100x cheaper in terms of cost. Now, for context here, Perplexity AI, I actually have a tutorial on what that is, but it's also a very similar product where you can ask a question and get a result. They do something similar where they take a search result, fan that out and search lots of different sources and summarize that in an answer. So in the kind of, at the surface level, it's very, very similar. However, Perplexity AI their main value proposition proposition are really quick, kind of snappy answers. It's seen as this kind of answer engine to research, but they're not providing this deep kind of report-like source where they're going through hundreds, potentially thousands of sources and then giving you a really, really deep one. So they certainly have the infrastructure to be able to do that. And if they're coming out and saying that they can do this 10 to 100x cheaper, then I guess the first question is, why haven't they already? But it's going to be very interesting seeing more and more people come out. And that kind of leads me on to the next point. Within just a day, people have come out on Twitter and have talked about open source projects. Take Harrison Chase, the creator of LangChain, which is an agentic framework and kind of this open source library of ways that you can develop with AI. Now, he came out and talked about this GPT researcher project that is publicly available and open source that's been out for a while now, and it basically does exactly the same thing. There are lots of these open source projects which claim to be able to do exactly what OpenAI's Deep Researcher can. Now, I'm intrigued to see how well these perform because although, as Greg Brockman said, it's just O3, the model, plus web research and maybe some Python, it's actually behind the scenes, there's more complicated stuff going on. OpenAI did actually fine-tune the model. We also don't know how they're prompting it, and we don't know what those other kind of extra flows are. Where do they fan out the queries? How many loops are happening here? How do they evaluate whether a citation is good? But realistically, it is quite feasible that behind the scenes is actually not that complicated to build. They do just have access to this latest O3 model, and maybe that is just everything that makes the difference. I think one of the most important things here, and something that maybe Harrison Chase and these other open source projects kind of miss, is that 99% of the world simply aren't developers, myself included. So a lot of people aren't going to go out of their way to build and code these kind of projects behind the scenes. And OpenAI is used by hundreds of millions of people. So them having this out in the open is clearly a great way to get distribution and just get access to this deep research at, seemingly not that expensive. Yes, it's $200 a month compared to maybe $20 a month, 10 times more than the other plan. But when you compare this to $150,000 on private medical consultations, that is a much, much cheaper option. So what are the limitations or the drawbacks? Well, of course, as we just said, it's in the $200 a month plan, so it is quite expensive. And when you compare that to Gemini Deep Research by Google, which is just for $20 a month, you really have to ask the question, how good of a difference is it? Now, some people have reported that Gemini's Deep Research tends to summarize information across those resources, and perhaps it can resource thousands of kind of web links compared to maybe just hundreds in Deep Research by OpenAI. But people have then cited that OpenAI is actually a deeper, more richer kind of report. So you have to kind of weigh up whether that's actually worth it. For the majority of people, I'm not sure it would be. Outside of the expensive cost per month, there are still also hallucinations. Now, in all of the benchmarks, it does seem that hallucinations compared to previous models, even their latest reasoning models, which are much lower hallucinations than the traditional models, even though they are still lower in hallucinations, they still exist. So you still have to fact check the citations. You have to make sure that the correct summary of the citation is actually taken. You might have the right citation, but maybe the point they made in the citation is not actually what the research report has concluded. And I think the biggest thing is what they announced in their own product release. It's very susceptible to rumors on the internet, things that have no backing as to whether this has authority and is a valid citation. So if you could just swamp the internet with lots of information saying one thing, then maybe that's going to influence these kind of research models. So that is not necessarily a problem that we've had to combat. But since these models are becoming the primary mode for search, they're going to be abused and they're going to be hacked in certain ways. And maybe just injecting rubbish information is the first way to do this. Now, I do think companies like OpenAI are going to change their methods where they validate the resources and the citations. Now, if you've liked this video, perhaps you would like me to do a comparison between Perplexity AI, Google's Gemini's Deep Research, and OpenAI's Deep Research products. We could do a side-by-side comparison. If that's something that you'd be interested in, then think about putting a comment down below and let me know. And otherwise, like and please subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out. Thank you very much and see you next time.